Chapter 21. Love the Ones You're Given. To defeat Planned Parenthood and the abortion industry, I knew we had to explain what abortion really is directly to the world. That required talking honestly about how abortion ends the life of a child, about the harm it does to women and girls, and about the damage it does to men and families as well. But we also had to be able to offer a better vision, one in which every life is loved, protected, and I knew that vision had to start close to home. Hudson, it had to start with me. Over time, it became increasingly clear that if pursuing my work caused me to neglect the people God had put in my life, I was doing something wrong. It mattered how well I loved and treated the people closest to me. It mattered, too, how I received God's love and grew in my faith. This was a lesson I first learned early on in my activism work. When I was a sophomore in high school, a friend and I decided to stage a major fundraising gala to raise relief funds for famine victims in Niger. Our timeline was short. The international community had largely ignored the crisis. The money we raised could mean life or death for families. We already had a contract with an international relief organization that was prepared to fly in life-saving nutrition supplies if we could raise the money in time to pay for the food and flight. In addition to juggling classes and homework, I was pulling late nights to make this event happen and to get people to attend and donate. Some nights, I returned home after 10 o'clock, which was technically my curfew on school nights. One evening, I walked in and barely said hello to my parents before rushing up the stairs to my bedroom. "Lurs," my dad called from the living room, using one of my family's favorite nicknames for me. Can you come chat for a minute?" "Sure, Dad." I said and sat down in a cozy armchair. "We love what you're doing," he said gently but matter-of-factly. "But we are concerned about how you're doing it. You're not here for dinners with the family. You are rarely here during most of the weekend. We're your family, not your hotel." I felt a little defensive, but I knew he was right. There had been several nights when my mom had asked if I would be joining for dinner, but I said no. I hadn't been around. I had been too busy. Looking back, I'm grateful my dad called me out on that. It reoriented the way I looked at my work. No matter how important I felt my work was, that did not give me a pass to ignore my family or leave them to do my chores. The people in my family, the people I lived with, deserved my time, presence, and help. They had their own needs, their own desires for connection, their own struggles and hopes and joys. Was I present to them? Or was I so busy with my own work, no matter how important I thought it was, that I was ignoring the eternal souls right before my eyes? When we are working toward a higher goal or fighting for an important cause, it can be easy to justify cutting corners in the way we care for the people closest to us. But to build our character and practice true love, we must be faithful to the ones with whom we've been entrusted. Moving back to California after years in D.C. gave me more opportunities to do just that. I'm forever grateful that my parents gave me 7 siblings, and my brothers and sisters are some of my favorite companions. They've taught me so much about the preciousness of family, about acceptance and friendship. They've also given me some amazing nieces and nephews. My relationship with my sister Katerina in particular has taught me about love, especially in the face of the unexpected and unknown. On Kat's 18th birthday, I was home from Washington for a few days to visit my family. When I asked her where she wanted to eat lunch, she suggested Denny's. It had also been my favorite restaurant as a teenager. I especially appreciated those late-night dinners with friends after concerts or pro-life activism. Kat sat across from me. We ordered pancakes and an omelet, breakfast for lunch. Kat was restless, occasionally commenting, "I need a cigarette." I asked about her classes. I asked a few questions about her love life. Apparently, she was dating a guy who was not treating her well. Her hair was the 4th different color I had seen in the last 10 months. black this time. She had also gotten another piercing since I last saw her. I asked if it hurt, and she laughed. The external signs, the cigarettes, the piercings, the hair, troubled me less than her mental health, what was going on within. Children! I knew she wasn't happy. She was not practicing any faith, and I knew she struggled with anxiety. I decided to change the subject and ask her about horseback riding. This question resonated. Horses seemed to be the only thing about which she was truly passionate. But throughout our lunch, the conversation was strained. She picked at her pancakes unenthusiastically. I knew she was anxious about the calories. I probed gently, trying to get her to share more about what was going on inside her heart. She stared at me blankly. "Sis," she said, her emotional numbness all too apparently, "I don't really want to talk about stuff." We both knew what she meant. The conversation was over. 9 months later, I received news about Kat that had me rushing home to California from a speaking event in Oregon. After the plane landed, one of my younger brothers picked me up, and we headed right to the hospital. I stepped off the hospital elevator and faced the closed, cold, white double doors of the ICU. They were locked, and a small sign posted outside read, "No visitors for the next 30 minutes. Shift change." Through the crack in the door, I could see down the long, sterile corridor. Kat was in there. Somewhere. I rang the intercom repeatedly and started to choke up as I asked again for someone to let me in. Finally, the familiar face of my older brother appeared on the other side of the door. He pulled it open and let me in. We hurried down the hall and into a dark side room. As my eyes adjusted, I saw my sister lying on the bed. The IV in her arm delivered the antidote to the bottle of pills she had swallowed the day before. Kat looked younger than her 18 years and more vulnerable. Her tousled, purple-dyed hair fell in tangled strands onto her face. She raised a hand in a weak greeting. "Hi, Li." Relief flooded my heart, and I burst into tears. "Kat, I'm so glad you're okay." "I've got 9 lives," she smiled wryly. I held her hand and sat there, tears falling. "I'm so sorry, sis," I choked. "I'm so sorry. I love you so much." Kat pushed the hair off her face and sat up a little straight in bed. "Sis," she asked quietly, "do you have a hair tie? Would you mind French braiding my hair?" Through my tears, I slowly, awkwardly began the braid. I had never been good at braiding hair. Katerina had always been the crafty one, the one good with her hands and skill at styling hair. After fumbling for a few minutes, I managed a lopsided braid, relieved there was no mirror for her to see how off-kilter it was. She looked ahead peacefully, her eyes slowly closing, as she drifted off to sleep. Katerina has always loved horses. She worked for a few months at a small horse ranch by a beach near San Francisco. Whenever she could, she rode her favorite horse bareback down the cliffs onto the sand so she could gallop by the ocean, her hair flying in the wind. That was my little sister, daring to the point of recklessness, full of zeal for life. It had been nearly 2 months since that night in the hospital, and now my sister Nina and I were hurrying down a rural Tennessee road to join Kat at another horse ranch, this time a residential treatment facility that helped people recover from eating disorders and other mood comorbidities. Kat's zeal for life had been drained away in the weeks and months leading up to her suicide attempt. I prayed that the patience, loyalty, and instinctive life force of the horses at the treatment center would help restore it. Kat had been there for almost 5 weeks. We were meeting her for a family therapy weekend. Once at the ranch, we met Kat among a group of 50 other patients and their families in the main hall. She looked great. She'd already added several pounds to her too-thin frame, and the light was coming back into her eyes. We 3 sisters hugged. "How's it been going, sis?" I asked. "Really good," she said. "You'll really like the sessions today." There were about 40 attendees at this family encounter section. We all sat in plastic chairs at round tables. A staff therapist opened the session. "It's so important to find the cause that is greater than ourselves," the therapist explained. The cause, I thought. Suddenly I was 9 again, remembering how I first encountered my cause. Maybe I was too young. Maybe my parents should have done a better job of hiding that abortion book. But without that book, and so many other providential moments, I was not sure I would have found my cause. And had I not found my cause, I'm not sure I would have overcome my own demons, discovered myself, or discovered God. My cause had filled my life with purpose in some of my darkest moments. It reminded me that life, this precious, fragile life we've each been given, is always worth fighting for. We broke into groups by family. The therapist handed us a large sheet of brown paper with a blank family tree on it. Our job was to insert the dysfunctions of family members we knew, or had been told about, going as far back in the generations as possible, and to use various symbols to indicate those dysfunctions. Nina, Kat, and I went to work filling in roles and symbols. Suicide, addiction, divorce, mental illness, abuse. Within an hour, our tree was thick with the symbols of dysfunction. Our family tree showed a clear pattern of human failure, the sins of one generation affecting the next generation, and there we were at the bottom of the tree, with those wounds now visible on so many branches. Nina, Kat, and I talked through our family tree together. There were tears, but most of all a sense of hope. We now had a better understanding of what our family of origin had been through. We also understood how the wounds of our grandparents had directly impacted our parents, and, inevitably then, our own childhoods. My mother would tell us, as we were growing up, every generation has the chance to do better than the generation before. We just hope you kids do better than me and your father. I always understood her to mean that she wanted us to be healthier, happier, and more successful than they were. Most parents want that. But I now realized more deeply the yearning of their hearts. They wanted us to be healthier, happier, and more successful. But even more so, they wanted us to break the cycles of dysfunction and pain in our family. They wanted it to stop with them. And while they didn't have all the answers for how to heal the wounds in our family, they did their best to transmit to us kids every ounce of what they did know. Sometimes the solutions they improvised created their own harm, but more often than not, they succeeded in making our lives better. And my parents tried, passionately, to create something beautiful and new for their family, doing their best to pull from everything good and wise and loving in their own upbringings. I realized that with an overwhelming gratitude, that just as specific wounds could influence the behaviors of one generation to the next, so could that generation's choices to pursue healing, to choose faith, to choose love. Our family trees filled in, we all shuffled outside into the afternoon light toward a fire pit. The therapist asked the assembled families to come forward one by one and burn their maps in the pit. We watched a few families take their turn. Who wants to go next? The therapist asked. With our rolled up family of origin tree in hand, Katerina stepped forward. I am burning depression, anxiety, and addiction, she announced. The chart flared as she dropped it into the fire. We had brought our family dysfunction into the light. We had named it. Now we could grieve over it. Together, we were committed to overcoming our inherited bad habits of thought and deed. We could change our lives, and we could redirect the trajectory of our family. As we watched the flames lick the map, we three sisters stood there quietly and put our arms around one another. The family map, with all its symbols of pain, burned briefly, then flamed out, collapsing into embers. That night, as Nina slept in a twin bed next to mine in our guest cabin, I thought back over the events of the day. I marveled at Kat's life, this little sister I'd begged God to give me as a young girl. She and Nina were among the best gifts of my life. All my siblings were. What was God doing with our family? I knew that through our family's pain we were discovering more about ourselves and one another than we even knew there was to discover. Our understanding would bring grief, but it would also bring healing and freedom. Listening to the quiet hum of the cabin air conditioner, I drifted off to sleep, consoled by the bright hope of that freedom. We've all been entrusted with people to love, grandparents, parents, siblings, children, extended family, or friends who have come to rely on us like family. Does someone feel lonely or unloved? Do our loved ones feel heard and seen and appreciated? Do they know that we care, that we are there for them, that we will fight for them? It can be easy to become consumed in our work, especially at those times when we experience great momentum and feel we are making progress. It can also be easy to forget our loved ones during the harder times in our work, when we may face tremendous obstacles and struggle to keep going. No matter what we are going through in our fight to make the world better, faithfully loving those around us, as imperfect as our love may be, is a constant call. We also need the love our families have to give us, however imperfect it may be. We can achieve the greatest victories in our activism. We can stand up to terrible evils and speak great truths. But if we reject or ignore those closest to us, have we really succeeded? To love our families means we must also pursue healing in our families. Love means making time for one another, celebrating each other's joys, and embracing each other when we hurt. Healing can mean having the hard conversations when necessary, saying sorry for our failings, and being quick to forgive. It can mean getting outside help too. Our causes require sacrifice, but our families deserve our sacrifice too. A family open to love that seeks healing and strives to grow together is the secret to a changed and renewed world. As we fight for our causes, may we never stop fighting to love our families the best.